I stared at the documents spread across Patricia's mahogany desk, my hands trembling slightly as I held the pen. The afternoon sunlight streaming through her law office windows felt surreal, almost too bright for what I was about to do. "Are you absolutely certain about this, Margaret?" Patricia asked, her voice gentle but firm. She'd been my best friend for 40 years, but today she was also my attorney, and I could see the concern in her eyes behind her reading glasses. I took a deep breath and signed my name on the final page. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. That signature changed everything. But to understand why a 68-year-old retired teacher was sitting in a lawyer's office, rewriting her will and putting her life savings into an irrevocable trust, I need to take you back 8 months to where this all began. It started on a Tuesday morning in March. I was in my garden, pruning the rose bushes my late husband Tom had planted 20 years ago, when I heard the sound of a car in my driveway. I wasn't expecting anyone, but my heart lifted when I saw it was my son David's SUV. Visits from him had become increasingly rare over the past year. "Mom!" David called out, waving as he got out of the driver's side. But my smile faded slightly when I saw Sarah, my daughter-in-law, emerge from the passenger seat with that particular expression I'd learned to recognize, the one that meant she wanted something. "What a wonderful surprise," I said, pulling off my gardening gloves and giving David a hug. Sarah air-kissed near my cheek, careful not to actually touch me with her perfectly applied makeup. "We were just in the neighborhood and thought we'd stop by," David said, but I could hear the slight strain in his voice. After 36 years of being his mother, I knew when my son was uncomfortable. We settled in my living room with tea and the lemon cookies I always kept on hand. The same living room where David had opened Christmas presents as a boy, where Tom and I had celebrated anniversaries, where 3 generations of memories lived in every corner. The house wasn't large by modern standards, a modest 3-bedroom ranch in a quiet suburban neighborhood, but it was paid off, well-maintained, and filled with a lifetime of love. "Mom, your garden looks beautiful as always," David started, but Sarah cut him off. "Margaret, we need to talk to you about something important." She set down her teacup with a decisive clink. "David and I have been doing a lot of thinking about your living situation." "My living situation?" I repeated carefully. "This house is just too much for you to handle alone," Sarah continued, gesturing around the room as if the walls were about to collapse. "All this maintenance, the yard work, the property taxes. It's not practical for someone your age." I felt my spine stiffen. I managed just fine. "I enjoy taking care of my home." "Of course you do, but let's be realistic." Sarah leaned forward with what I'm sure she thought was a caring expression. "You're almost 70. How much longer can you keep this up? The stairs, the yard, winter snow removal." "There are no stairs. It's a ranch house," I interrupted, "and I have a service for the snow." Sarah waved away my objections. "The point is, you don't need all this space. 1 person in 3 bedrooms? It's wasteful. Have you thought about downsizing? One of those nice senior living communities? They have activities, meal plans." "I'm not interested in moving to a senior facility," I said firmly. "I'm perfectly capable of living independently." "Mom, Sarah's just concerned about you," David said weakly, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. "Actually," Sarah continued, her tone shifting to something almost rehearsed, "David and I have been presented with an incredible business opportunity. It's a chance to finally get ahead, to build something substantial for our future, for the grandchildren we're planning to have." There it was. I'd been waiting for the real reason for this visit. "The thing is," Sarah went on, "we need capital. Significant capital. About $500,000. The number hung in the air like smoke. "And we were thinking," she continued smoothly, "that this would be the perfect time for you to sell this house. The market is strong right now. This property is probably worth $600,000, maybe more. You could downsize to a small condo or that senior living place, bank $100,000 for yourself, and invest the rest with us. It's really a win-win situation." I sat very still, processing what I'd just heard. My daughter-in-law had just asked me to sell my home, the home I'd lived in for 32 years, the home where I'd raised my son and cared for my husband through his final illness to fund her business venture. "What kind of business are we talking about?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Sarah's eyes lit up. "It's a wellness consulting franchise. The company is revolutionary, combining nutrition, fitness, and life coaching. I've been researching it for months. The returns are incredible. We're talking about 6 figures in the first year alone." "And what experience do you have in wellness consulting?" I asked. Her smile tightened. "I don't need prior experience. That's the beauty of a franchise model. They provide all the training and support. This is my chance to finally be an entrepreneur, to build something meaningful. I looked at David, who was studying his hands. What do you think about this? He cleared his throat. Sarah's really excited about it, Mom, and we could use the financial boost. My job is stable, but we want more than just stable, you know? What I wanted to say was that I knew Sarah had started and abandoned 3 different business ventures in the 5 years since she'd married my son. I knew about the online boutique that never sold anything, the essential oils pyramid scheme that cost them thousands, and the social media consulting business that consisted of posting inspirational quotes on Instagram. I knew that David was working 60-hour weeks to cover their lifestyle while Sarah pursued her dreams. But I was trying to be a supportive mother-in-law. I was trying not to interfere. I need to think about this, I said finally. Of course, Sarah said, but I could see the flash of irritation in her eyes. We just wanted to plant the seed. But don't think too long, these franchise opportunities fill up fast. We'd need to move on this within a few months. After they left, I sat in my living room for a long time, looking at the family photos on the mantel. My wedding photo, David as a baby, Tom and I at David's college graduation. This wasn't just a house. This was my life, my security, my independence. I picked up the phone and called Patricia. Over the next few weeks, the pressure intensified. Sarah started sending me links to senior living facilities. Just look at the amenities, her texts would say. Indoor pool, game nights. You'd make so many friends. She'd show up unannounced with real estate agents. We were just nearby, and I thought while we're here, we could get a professional opinion on what your house is worth. No obligation, of course. She'd make comments about how difficult the house must be to maintain. I noticed your gutters look a little clogged. That's the kind of thing that's so hard to keep up with at your age. In a condo, the association handles all that. David called occasionally, his voice apologetic. I know Sarah can be persistent, Mom. She just really believes in this opportunity. And we could use your help. David, I said during one of these calls, what happened to not wanting me to co-sign your car loan last year because you wanted to make it on your own? There was a long pause. This is different. This is an investment in our future. Your future too, really. When the business takes off, we'll all benefit. That's when I started doing my research. I spent hours on my computer, something my students might have been surprised to learn their old English teacher could do quite well. I researched the wellness franchise Sarah was so excited about. I found hundreds of complaints, failed locations, people who'd lost their life savings. The incredible returns were possible only for the top 1% of franchisees, and even that was questionable. I researched whether selling my home made financial sense. It didn't. My property taxes were low because of senior exemptions. My mortgage was paid off. Even with downsizing, between realtor fees, moving costs, and the price of a decent condo, I'd be lucky to keep $200,000, not the $100,000 Sarah had casually mentioned. Most importantly, I researched what would happen if I gave them money and the business failed. I'd be 68 years old with diminished savings and no home. If I needed care as I aged, I'd have nothing. I'd be dependent on the very son and daughter-in-law who were currently pressuring me to give up my security. By month 4, Sarah's suggestions had turned to direct pressure. She'd lecture me about being selfish. Don't you want your son to succeed? Don't you want to be part of our future? Family helps family, Margaret. She'd compare me to other parents. David's friends' parents just gave them $200,000 for their house down payment. They understand what it means to support your children. She'd even try guilt. I guess we'll just have to tell our future children that Grandma chose a big empty house over helping their parents build a better life. David was caught in the middle, and I could see it wearing on him. He'd lost weight. He looked tired. When I tried to talk to him alone, he'd just say, "Please, Mom. Just think about it. Sarah really has her heart set on this." The breaking point came in month 6. I was at my doctor's office for a routine checkup when Sarah called. She was crying. "Margaret, I just found out I'm pregnant." My heart leapt despite everything. "Oh, Sarah, that's wonderful news." "It is, but it also means we need to move faster on the franchise. I want to have the business established before the baby comes. I want to give my child the best life possible, and I can't do that if you won't help us." "Sarah, we should talk about this in person." "No, we need to talk about it now. David's too afraid to push you, but I'm not. You're being incredibly selfish. You have this huge asset just sitting there while your son and future grandchild struggle. What kind of grandmother does that?" Something in me snapped. Maybe it was being called selfish one too many times. Maybe it was the weaponization of my future grandchild. Maybe it was just 6 months of relentless pressure finally breaking through my desire to be accommodating. Sarah, I'm not selling my house. What? Her tears stopped remarkably quickly. I'm not selling my house to fund your business venture. This is my home, my security, and my decision. You can't be serious. After everything we've talked about? I'm very serious. I've done my research on that franchise. The failure rate is over 80%. Even if I wanted to help, which I'm questioning, I wouldn't invest in something so risky. How dare you? Sarah's voice went shrill. You're calling me a failure before I even start? I'm saying the business model is questionable. If you want to be an entrepreneur, I suggest starting small, with your own money, building something sustainable. My own money? I don't have money because we're buried in bills, because David's salary isn't enough, because we need a real chance to get ahead. And you, sitting on $600,000 in equity, won't help your own son. Sarah, I think we should both calm down and discuss this. No, you've made your choice. You've chosen a house over your family. Don't expect to have a relationship with your grandchild. If you won't support us, why should we include you in our lives? She hung up. I sat in my car in the medical building parking lot, shaking. Had my daughter-in-law just threatened to cut me off from my future grandchild because I wouldn't sell my house? That evening, David called. His voice was strained. Mom, Sarah told me about your conversation. I think you were pretty harsh with her. David, she asked me to sell my home. She's pregnant and emotional. Can't you just consider it? For me? For your grandchild? What happens when the business fails, David? And statistically, it will. Where will you live? What will you fall back on? And where will I live after giving up my home? So you don't believe in us. You think we're failures. I think you're being manipulated into a bad investment. There's a difference. I can't talk to you right now. He hung up. I didn't hear from either of them for 3 weeks. No calls, no texts, no updates about the pregnancy. The silence was deafening. That's when I called Patricia and made an appointment. Not just as my friend, but as an attorney specializing in elder law and estate planning. Patricia listened to everything. She didn't interrupt, just made notes. When I finished, she looked at me seriously. Margaret, what you're describing is a form of financial exploitation. It's more common than you'd think, adult children pressuring elderly parents to liquidate assets. But I'm not elderly, I protested. I'm only 68. Doesn't matter. The dynamic is the same. And the threat to withhold access to your grandchild? That's coercion. She pulled out a legal pad. Let's talk about protecting yourself. Over the next few weeks, Patricia and I created a comprehensive plan. We set up an irrevocable trust for my house, ensuring it couldn't be sold without approval from multiple trustees, including Patricia herself. We revised my will to establish a trust fund for my future grandchildren's education, managed by an independent trustee, so Sarah could never access it directly. We created healthcare directives and a durable power of attorney, naming Patricia as my agent, not David. If things escalate, Patricia warned, you need to be protected. I've seen families tear themselves apart over money. Maybe I should just give them something, I said weakly, to keep the peace. Margaret. Patricia took off her glasses and looked at me hard. If you give them money now, you're teaching them that pressure and emotional manipulation work. It won't be the last time. And when the business fails, and it will, they'll be back asking for more. You'll be 68 with no home and depleted savings, and they'll be blaming you for not giving them enough. She was right. I knew she was right. 2 weeks later, I received a certified letter from an attorney. Sarah and David were formally requesting that I sell my house and gift them $500,000. If I refused, they would reluctantly have to limit contact to protect their growing family from toxic negativity. I had to read it 3 times to believe it. My own son had signed a legal letter threatening to cut me off from my grandchild if I didn't give them $500,000. I called Patricia. We need to move forward with everything. Now. She didn't argue. The final piece of the plan was the confrontation. I didn't want to, but Patricia insisted. You need closure, and they need to understand there are consequences for their behavior. I invited them to dinner. To my surprise, they accepted. Maybe they thought the formal letter had scared me into compliance. Sarah arrived looking triumphant, her small baby bump visible under her designer dress. David looked uncomfortable but determined. They sat at my dining room table, the table where I'd served hundreds of family meals, and waited. I've made a decision about your request, I said. My hands folded calmly in front of me. My heart was racing, but I kept my voice steady. Finally, Sarah said, I'm glad you've come to your senses. I'm not selling my house. The temperature in the room dropped. However, I continued, I have made some financial arrangements for my future grandchild. I slid a folder across the table. David opened it, his face paling as he read. I've established an educational trust for my grandchildren, I explained. $50,000, invested conservatively, managed by an independent trustee. It can only be used for educational expenses, tuition, books, supplies. It will ensure my grandchildren have access to college or trade school, regardless of their parents' financial situation. $50,000? Sarah's voice went shrill. That's it? That's all you're willing to give? That's all I'm able to give while still protecting my own financial security. This is insulting. Sarah stood up so fast her chair scraped loudly. We need money now, not locked away in some trust. How is this supposed to help us? It's supposed to help my grandchildren, not fund a risky business venture. You know what? Sarah grabbed her purse. Forget it. Forget all of it. You'll never meet this baby. You'll never be in our lives. We're done. Sarah David started. No, David, your mother has made it clear where her priorities are. A house matters more than her son. Money matters more than family. Fine, she can grow old alone in her precious house. She stormed out. David stayed seated, staring at the trust documents. Mom, he said quietly, she's pregnant. She's scared about money. Can't you understand that? I understand being scared, I said gently. I was scared when your father died, and I was alone in this house wondering how I'd manage. I was scared when I retired and had to make my savings stretch. Being scared doesn't mean making reckless decisions or asking others to sacrifice their security. Is that what you think I'm doing? Being reckless? I think you're being pressured. And I think you know this franchise is a bad idea, but you're afraid to stand up to your wife. He stood up slowly. Maybe you're right. Maybe Sarah can be pushy. But she's my wife. I have to support her, even if that means choosing her over you. He walked out, leaving the trust documents on the table. I sat alone in my dining room and let myself cry for the first time in months. The next 3 months were hell. Sarah blocked my number. David sent short, formal texts declining invitations for holidays. I found out through Facebook that they'd moved forward with the franchise, taking out a massive loan instead. I gardened. I read. I volunteered at the local library's literacy program. I had lunch with Patricia and other friends. I lived my life, but there was a constant ache where my son used to be. Then, one evening in late November, there was a knock at my door. David stood on my porch, alone, looking older than his 36 years. Can I come in? He asked. We sat in my living room with tea. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. The franchise is failing, David finally said. We're 3 months in and haven't made back 1/10 of our investment. The training and support Sarah was promised doesn't exist. We're locked into a 5-year lease on the commercial space. We owe $70,000 on the loan, and we have no way to pay it back. I stayed quiet, letting him talk. Sarah's devastated. She won't admit she was wrong, but I can see it. She's stressed, the baby's due in 4 months, and we're drowning financially. He looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. I almost came to ask if you'd reconsider selling the house. My heart sank. But then I realized if you'd said yes 6 months ago, we'd have lost your money too. We'd have taken your house, your security, your retirement, and we'd have burned through it all on a failed business. And you'd be left with nothing. A tear ran down his cheek. You protected me from my own stupidity, Mom, and I repaid you by choosing a manipulative business pitch over the woman who raised me. I moved to sit beside him, putting my arm around his shoulder like I had when he was small. What are you going to do? I asked. Sarah's moving back to her parents' house until the baby comes. We're separating, at least for now. I need to figure out who I am when I'm not constantly trying to please her. He wiped his eyes. I'm so sorry, Mom. For all of it. I know, sweetheart. I don't expect you to help us financially. I know we burned that bridge. I just wanted you to know that you were right. About everything. I took a breath. David, I can't help with the business debt. That's yours to resolve. But I can help you find a good lawyer to negotiate with the franchise company. And there's a bedroom here if you need a place to stay while you figure things out. You'd let me stay here? After everything? You're my son. I love you. That never changed, even when you hurt me. He broke down then, really cried, and I held him like I'd done when he was a boy with a scraped knee. David moved into his old bedroom that week. He got a lawyer who negotiated a settlement with the franchise company they wanted out of the failing location as much as David did. He started therapy. He began rebuilding his life piece by piece. Sarah had the baby in March, a beautiful little girl named Emma. Sarah's still at her parents' house, still insisting the franchise would have worked if everyone had just supported her more. David sees Emma regularly, and he's working on setting healthy boundaries with his ex-wife. Last month, David sat me down with a serious expression. "Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." My heart clenched, wondering if he was going to ask for money again. "Teach me how you did it. How you stayed strong when everyone was calling you selfish. How you knew your boundaries and kept them, even when it cost you everything you cared about. I need to learn that." So now, twice a week, we have coffee on my porch. We talk about boundaries, about the difference between helping and enabling, about loving people while still protecting yourself. Sometimes Patricia joins us, sharing legal and practical wisdom. David's learning to say no. He's learning that setting boundaries isn't cruel, it's necessary. He's learning that real love doesn't require you to sacrifice your well-being. I wish I could say there was a perfect happy ending. Sarah hasn't apologized. The relationship between David and me is still healing. I'm still not allowed to see Emma as much as I'd like. But I'm 68 years old, living in my home, financially secure, with my integrity intact. My grandchildren's education is protected. My son is learning to be a stronger man. And I sleep well at night knowing I didn't enable a disaster that would have destroyed us all. Patricia says I should write a book, How to Say No to Your Kids Without Losing Your Mind, she jokes. Maybe I will. But for now, I'm just grateful. Grateful I had friends who gave me good counsel. Grateful I trusted my instincts. Grateful I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to rescue them from their own choices. This morning, David helped me plant new rose bushes right next to the ones his father planted 20 years ago. As we worked in the soil together, he said, "You know what the best gift you ever gave me was, Mom?" "What's that?" "Showing me what it looks like to be a person with self-respect. I just wish I'd learned it before I lost you for 6 months." "You didn't lose me," I said. "I was always here, waiting in my house." He laughed. "Your house that I tried to make you sell. The house you'll inherit someday when I'm gone, along with whatever's left in my savings, and the knowledge that your mother loved you enough to tell you no." We finished planting as the sun set. Inside, I had dinner warming in the oven, enough for 2. My son, my home, my boundaries, my peace. Patricia calls it a success story. I call it survival. But maybe they're the same thing. If there's anything I learned from all this, it's that you can't sacrifice yourself to save someone else. Not your house, not your security, not your peace of mind. Because when you have nothing left, you can't help anyone, including yourself. And sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for someone you love is to let them face the consequences of their choices. It's painful, it's lonely, it costs you things you never wanted to lose. But standing on my porch tonight, watching my son drive away to pick up his daughter for their evening together, seeing him smile again, really smile, I know I made the right choice. My house is still here. I'm still here. And my son is finally learning to be the man I always knew he could be. That's worth more than any business opportunity could ever be.